Welcome back. So this is Joel, and I was recently playing around with the data center topology, right? And I really wanted to simulate VMware, right? So I wanted to have my VMware ESXi host in my topology. I wanted to create vCenter and do a lot of bunch of cool stuff. So while kind of researching on that, I found that you can also use nested virtualization to kind of spin up ESXi and vCenter inside your Eve itself. And there you go. So this is, I built a small learning lab, right, for VMware, just to give you an insight as to how you can do this, right? And maybe make a couple of videos on how to install ESXi, how to install vCenter. Probably if time permits, I'll maybe even talk a little bit about networking, storage, and so on, right? So this will be a series of videos on how to build your own, home lab with respect to VMware, right? How you can spin up stuff and how you can get it ready so that you can get your hands dirty with VMware, right? Now a little bit of learning curve here with respect to VMware, I would say is let me just grab my pen. Okay, so I don't think I have to explain what virtualization is for you guys, probably, right? That's a pretty much straightforward, right? But let me just spend few seconds on it. Virtualization, nothing but, especially in data center virtualization, the whole need is to have virtual machines in your data center, right? So you basically need to have what we call as the hypervisor, right? So you're gonna have hypervisor. You have hypervisors from VMware, you have it from Windows, you have it for Linux, which is the KVM. So different types of hypervisors. And on top of that, right, on the on top of this hypervisor, which is in our case, we'll basically be using the ESXi hypervisor, right, which is the hypervisor for your VMware, right? And this is a bare metal hypervisor. At the same time, you can also I'll talk about that in a minute, but this is primarily a bare metal hypervisor. And once you install the hypervisor on top of this, you will now be able to spin up what? Your VMs, right? You can have probably a Windows VM, you can have a Red Hat, you can have Ubuntu, right? You can have CentOS, whatnot, right? You can spin up any number of VMs on this. So this is basically your traditional, VMware. Now to kind of work on a lab, right? To build your own lab. It's little tricky, right, if to get this hypervisor running on a bare metal, right, because this is primarily a bare metal hypervisor, which means people generally run this on HP servers, Dell, UCS, and so on, right, directly on them. Now, what resources do we have at our disposal? Generally, an engineer, a techie generally has just a laptop, right, and how would you kind of learn VMware if you just have a laptop, right? And that's where a couple of other hypervisors, right, come into play, which are your, you would have heard about Fusion, right? VMware Fusion, this is for your Mac. And then you also have what we call as, I think, a workstation player, if I'm not wrong, right? It's been some time since I've used this one because I no longer use Windows, but probably you can check this out as well. This is for your Windows. Now, so this is one way of going about it, right? You install these hypervisors which are meant for your Mac or your Windows, which is your laptops, right? And this, on top of this, you can run your ESXi. So basically, it's going to be something like this. So this will be running on your laptop, right? And on top of this, you'll be basically running this. You'll be running the hypervisor, and obviously, which is the ESXi, and then out of that, you'll be running your VMs. So this is one way of going about it, right? Building your lab. Now, again, the problem here is that generally you want easily to kind of do even a simple lab, you would probably want easily like close to 32 GB of RAM. Kind of tricky, right? I think most of our laptops generally, if you have a 32 GB RAM or more than that, amazing, go ahead with this approach. It's the simplest and the easiest way, I would say. But if you don't have that, then in that case, you're probably stuck, right? So that was my scenario as well. Luckily, I have a Eve NG server, right, where I run all my Eve labs. So I was trying to search for an alternative, and that's why I came across Eve, right? And basically, in this lab, I'll show you how you can run the whole VMware lab on a Eve on a EVE-NG setup, right, which you use normally for your network emulation. So this is what we have. This is a simple topology. What we have, you can see a switch. You have two ESXi hosts, vCenter. I have created a Active Directory and a DNS as well because that's needed for vCenter. And then there is a router which is connecting to the home network, which in turn is connecting to the internet. I've added one more home network here on the left hand side of the vCenter because I wanted to show that in the latest version of vCenter, I'm not sure if this was there before, but in the latest version of vCenter, you can add multiple NICs, right, to the vCenter. So, you know, there will be one, in my case, there is going to be one kind of like LAN facing NIC, right, which will probably have 192.168. So this will be this IP address. Whereas I'm also going to put one more NIC here so that I can kind of like connect it directly from my home network on my direct laptop, right? So I'll show you that as well. So next, let me talk a little bit about your VMware, the vSphere 7, because everything we'll be doing in this lab, right, we'll be using vSphere 7, which is the latest, VMware version, right? A few things on the top of my mind is that when we talk about vSphere, okay, before that, let's just clear out some of the terms, right? Because if you're new to VMware, you probably might be thinking, what is vSphere, what is this, and what is that? So let me just clear some of those. The terms which you will hear are ESX, right? Then you will probably hear about vCenter, and so ESX, or you probably will also, people sometimes refer this as the vSphere as well, right? But traditionally, this is going to be your hypervisor, right? This is your hypervisor on which you're basically running your VMs, and vCenter is another, think of it as another VM, right? Which can be run, probably inside an ESX, or you can probably run it as a separate VM in your workstation player or Fusion, whatever. But generally the implementation is you run it inside a ESX, right? And what's the use of vCenter? vCenter is a server where which you use to manage the other ESXis, right? So in a traditional data center, this is how it is going to be, right? So you're going to have a data center of this sort. I'm not going to talk about the network and storage part here, just the compute part, right? So in a data center, you're probably going to have a lot of servers lying around, right? So let's say these are your servers, and you probably might have servers from different vendors, right? Maybe Cisco, you might have HP, Dell, and so on. So you're going to have a bunch of these. Now, on these servers, what you will be running is on these guys, you will be running your ESXi, right? This guy, the hypervisor, because at the end of the day, you want to use the compute power of these servers, right? You want to run your VMs over here like this. You want to run different VMs on this. So, you'll basically be running your ESX or hypervisor on this one. Then what you'll also do is probably you can have one more separate VM, or generally, like I said, it's generally run as a VM itself. So you can probably run this vCenter, one of this VM, you can run it as a vCenter, right? So this guy, you can run it as a vCenter, one of the VM which is sitting inside your, infrastructure or sitting inside your server, you can run it as a vCenter. Now vCenter, what it will give you is, it will give you a very nice, let's say it's a perfect package for managing all your hosts and the VMs which are present inside it, right? So you can manage all these hosts, right? All these ESXi hosts, and also probably a lot of VMs which are there inside each of the hosts, right? So all of that can be managed. In addition to that, you can also manage like your storage, you can manage your networking, you can spin up vSwitches and all of that, using the vCenter, right? So hope that is clear. So these are two terms which you'll probably hear a lot, right? Generally, like I said, ESXi hypervisor or vSphere host is what sometimes people call it. But I something which I like is I like to call the whole solution as probably vSphere, and then I could probably that would be a very good way of calling it, right? The whole solution as vSphere, which includes your ESXi and vCenter and so on, right? But anyway, though, that's just naming depending on how people call it. But hope this is clear. You have your hypervisor running on each of the bare metal servers generally, and then you have the vCenter, which is generally a VM which is running in one of these which is running as a VM inside one of these hosts, and that is then used to kind of manage, control, do networking, do storage, and all of that part for your whole infra. So that's mainly it. Now the thing about vSphere 7 mainly is one of the important thing is you have they have kind of rebuilt it. I think it came out just recently, so they have kind of rebuilt it a little bit, and they have added the most exciting part, which is the Kubernetes, right? So earlier, if you wanted to run Kubernetes, you probably would have to run it inside a VM. But now, especially with the vSphere, so that's why I would suggest you guys to check out vSphere 7 and use it in the labs and try it out, because with vSphere 7, your containers and your VMs, they can kind of like run side by side, right? Remember, your containers are mainly from your, from your Kubernetes space and your traditional VMs, right? So these guys, they can run side by side, and you don't have to run the container inside the VM anymore, right? So your Kubernetes and vSphere are really the one, right? So that's kind of like a very good convergence which they have come up with. You would really need some kind of licenses for running all of this if you're running a Kubernetes control plane and all of that. But like I said, this video is mainly for network engineers, right? So you probably will not be running applications. You will not be developing applications and stuff like that. So probably Kubernetes in depth, at least in this video, doesn't make much of a sense. So, but then that's a good thing about, let me just write it down as well if you, when it is, right? So that's a new thing with your vSphere 7. Cool. So that being said, I think we are good. Apart from that, what else? I think we are good, I guess. So we are good to basically start with the lab. Like I said, this is the main intention of my video is to kind of show you that you can spin up your own lab, especially on Eve. I just wanted to give you a little bit of context around it. Please do go through some good VMware documentation to get more idea into each of these pieces. But I think we are good to go and try out this, because this is the more crust, and it's a bit tricky installing this, so that's why I wanted to make a couple of videos on that. Right, so cool. So what do we do first is, give me a second. All right. So now, since we've got to install this on, so right now I have one ESXi host which I've already installed for testing purposes. The second one is what we will be bringing up in this video. First, let's go to the EVNG documentation, right? So the EVNG documentation, the folks at EVNG have written some very nice documentation on how to do it. So they are basically telling that if you want to run ESXi on your EVNG, you need to use this nested ESXi appliance, right? So nested technology, I think you probably know. Basically, the one which I explained earlier, right, where running ESXi on top of your VMware Fusion or workstation, that itself is nested, because you have like two layers of virtualization. Because your VMware Fusion is doing the virtualization, and on top of that, you're again doing virtualization using your ESXi, right? So that's why you really, and Eve also is pretty much the same, because Eve topology, what we are doing is, each of these are nothing but chemo images, right? So we are basically, there is one layer of virtualization which already happens over there, and we are basically running vCenter or VXXi on top of it. So it's more like a nested virtualization. So for that, the folks at ESXi, the folks at EVNG, they basically recommend to use this particular image. This is the 6.5, but obviously they have provided the links for different versions. So I am interested in the version 7, so that's why I went and downloaded the nested ESXi virtual appliance, right? William Lamb. So I think this guy kind of has written some very good blogs as well. Would request you to check it out. But you can basically go down to the virtually ghetto website, right, and you can find the various ESXi virtual appliances. I downloaded the 7.0 because that's what I'm looking at. That's what I want to install. So once you download that, pretty straightforward, like any of your Eve, just go on following the steps here, right? Extract the OVA and create a virtual hard disk drive, right, of 100 GB. It's not going to take 100 GB. It's going to just virtually assign 100 GB, more like a thin provisioning, right? So you can do this. Once you do that, just get everything, basically follow all these 3-4 steps. The default username is going to be VMware. Once you do this part, I think we are good to go and start, right? Add this particular node to your topology, right? It will basically be visible here. Let me show you. So you will find it under VMware. You can see here VMware ESXi and VMware vCenter. These are two things, right? You can also try VMware NSX. That's your network virtualization part. We'll probably, I don't know if I have time, I'll probably cover it, but the main idea is to do ESXi and vCenter in this couple of videos. Good. Alright, so we've got this, so let's go and probably start this up or boot this up, right? Let's see if it's booting up. Yeah, it's booting up. So that means, let me see on the window, what do we see? So let's go to ESXi 2 here. Probably it's going to take some time. Let's see what do we have on this guy. So it's 32774. Let's see what do we have here. Okay, so that's the difference. So let's change this to 32774, and I think now it should boot up. Yeah, there you go. So the first part is, yeah, it's going to take like this. It's going to take some time for the actual screen to show up where you have to do some task, right? But this is how you will see the initial screen, right? This is how you will see. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause the video until we get to the part where we can do some stuff, right? This will take actually generally probably 10 minutes. So I'm going to pause the video. And I see something has happened. So this is a screen. Because I have DHCP in my network, it's already picked up an address as well, but probably we'll fix that. Let me just grab my mouse here. Do I have it? Yeah, that's good. Okay, so what we'll do is let's hit enter, and you see what this particular screen is basically called as the DC UI, right? So we will we'll have to do some configuration changes here. So you see here you have to press F2. So I'm going to press F2 on my keyboard. It's going to ask for the password. Now the default password is basically your VMware. It's V and M being capital, and the rest is small. VMware 1 and exclamation, right? So I believe that's mentioned in the EVNG page as well. So let's hit enter. Let me show you that, right? So if you go to the EVNG page here, sorry, not this. Where is that? Yeah, here, right? So this is the root, and this is the default password which it comes with. All right, so what I'll do first is let's go and change that password, right? You can change it. So this is the place where you change it. So this is the old password. Let's enter the old password, and let's put in the new password which I like. Okay, so let's add it again. Okay, that's good. So I think the password is changed now. Let's go to the management network. So you can see on the right hand side, you can see the network adapters, right? So it looks like we have VMNIC 0, 1, 2 and 3, right? So these are the network adapters with the which are present along with my ESXi. Right now only one of the NIC is connected, right? So let's go back and let's scroll down. Let's go to the IPv4 configuration and let's select the static IP address. Let's not use DHCP, let's use static. And here what I'm going to do is probably change this to 192.168.10.22, right? The subnet mask is fine. The default gateway is also correct. So I'm going to keep that. Let's scroll down, go to the DNS. Looks like my DHCP did not give the DNS. So I'm going to put the DNS 192.168.10.5. That's my DNS server. Alternate, I don't want an alternate anyway. So, and this is going to be node 2, right? The host name is going to be node2.bitsplease.com. So this is my domain, right, which I've created in my Active Directory. I'm going to use that. The last part is adding any DNS suffixes. So I'll probably add it as bitsplease.com for now. I don't think it's going to be used much, but anyway, let's add it. So that looks good. So once we're done with that, let's escape out, and it's going to ask you if you want to save or restart the management network. I'm going to say yes. So now it should start restarting. Okay, so it looks good. We can also test if our configuration went through. So what we can do is we can test management network here. You can see you can put one in, that's a default gateway, this is the DNS, and this is the resolve, it's trying to resolve, right? So let's see, because I already have in my, let me show you that. So let's go to my Active Directory, right? So this is my Active Directory. Let's get this window off. So in my Active Directory, you can see I have something called node 1 and node 2, right? The node 2 is nothing but 192.168.10.22, right? So it's going to resolve to that. So this is a quick way to test if your network is up, right? So it's a ping utility, right? So I'm going to say enter. So it's going to now test. Okay, the first ping went through, the second one is fine, third one is fine. So looks like all of my stuff is working, right? It was able to resolve the DNS. If you want, I can try a different DNS, right? So I can try probably node1.bitsplice.com. Let's see if that is working. Let's try this. The default gateway is fine. This is fine. The DNS is fine, and you can see it also resolved the node1.bitsplice.com. Cool. So that's mainly with respect to that. So what we'll do now is, ideally what you should do is in your network, let's go back to the topology, right? So let's go back to topology. What we have done as of now, we have just installed this ESXi2. In your topology, what you could do is you can log into the Active Directory and try to connect to the ESXi directly from there. Now I really don't like, because the Active Directory is a little slow, so I like connecting to appliances from my laptop. So what I have done is I have done port forwarding on R2, right? So to kind of connect from my home network, this laptop which I have here is actually in my home network. So I'm trying to connect from the home network to the ESX directly from my browser here, right? But in your case, probably if you have not done port forwarding on R2, you might not be able to do that. In that case, you'll have to log in from your Active Directory, right? And if you're logging in from your Active Directory, how will you do it? You just need to go to the browser and plug in HTTP, or that information you will see it on the screen here, right? So let's escape. See here, it's going to tell you that information 192.168.10.22. So that's the IP which you need to hit from your from where? From your this guy, right? So let's see, 192.168.10.22. So this is the IP which you need to hit, and this is what you get, and you'll be able to log in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing from my laptop here, because I like doing that. Now for port forwarding, obviously I have configured a different IP address. I believe it is .5 if I'm not wrong. So this is my port forwarding IP address, which will just which will forward the connectivity to that particular IP 192.168.10.22. Just to check, let's see if I have connectivity to that. Let's try that first. Sorry, I think it has to be 5 if I'm not wrong. It's timed out, probably. Okay, let me fix that. Give me a second. Okay. So I just changed the IP port forwarding IP to a different IP, and it's working now. Probably the other IP is reserved by someone else. So I'm gonna do advanced, proceed, and let's check this out. So there you go. We can start seeing the screen appearing. So this is the ESXi login screen, right? So remember, your ESXi also can be managed by its own UI, right? This is that UI which you see. Let me put in my login. Yeah, there you go. So you can obviously manage your ESXi host using, the ESXi itself. So you might get a question, why do we want vCenter if you can manage it using this UI, right? Let's say there are some limited functionalities using this, right? But when you are designing a big data center and you have like hundreds and thousands of hosts, that's where it becomes very important to manage all of that using the vCenter, right? But if you have just one ESXi, probably you can still use this to manage it and play around with it, right? So that being said, you can see this is the default. So I already have one more host as well, one more ESXi which I had brought up before the lab. So this is that. Let me log into that as well, right? So this is that. This is the ESXi 01, and this is the ESXi 02 which I'm showing you right now. Let's see if that logged in. Probably not. Cannot. Okay, incorrect password. Let's try that again. Yeah, so this is the ESXi 01 and this is 02, right? So now if you go back to the topology, we have brought up these both guys. Let me show you some basic configs which you really need to do for everything to work properly. I would say the first thing is fix your NTP. NTP is very important, right? So you can go to manage here. I mean, before that, let's have a look at the host itself. You can see under the host, you can see some summary. You can see the CPU. I have reserved, I don't know, probably 9.6 gigahertz. you can see, and I have like 8 GB of RAM, and storage it's showing 0 because I have like a virtually provisioned storage right now. Apart from that, you can see the CPU, you can see the IP address, you can see the 192, this is the IP address, right? We'll talk about this probably networks later, but look at the IP address. This is the management IP of this particular ESXi. The DNS is there, default gateway is here, the adapters are here, right? That being said, you can see it's also telling me that the license which I'm using is the eval license. So this eval license will kind of expire after 60 days. Sweet. Okay, let's go to probably this is the network part, the VM network and the management network, the default. You can see the ports are all 0 except this, the VM kernel port is seen here. We'll talk about this later probably, right? The VM kernel port, let's go here. This is the VM kernel port. Anyway, so coming to the manage part, this is the one which you need to really do, which is going to probably, system and time, right? Go to the time and date section, and you can see here the NTP service is currently stopped. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to configure the NTP. So right now, and I'm going to say start and stop with host. So this particular NTP service will start and stop when the host is, started and stopped accordingly. And what's the NTP server? I'm going to put my 192.168.10.1, which is my default gateway, right, which is the router. I've enabled NTP on that, so I'm going to use that. I can also use something like a pool.ntp.org as well, because I have internet connectivity on this host, but still I'm going to use this one. So I'm going to save this. Something which I've noticed is that even after saving it, right, the NTP service will be, the status will be stopped. So what you got to do is, in that case, you will have to go to services, right, go to NTP here, and you can see it is stopped right now. So you start it, right, start the service, and let's refresh this, right? So you can see now the NTP service is running. So because the NTP service is running, I can now go to my system, and you should see, let's refresh this as well. And here you go. Now the NTP service is running, right? So that's one thing which you need to be careful. Apart from that, we have already enabled the DNS, and we have put the default route, right, which is the default gateway. One more thing which I would like to do is enable SSH and shell access. Now you can do that from here as well, right? I believe it's we go to host, and you can go to actions. It's pretty simple from here. You can just services, yeah, see, enable SSH and enable console shell. You can do it directly from here, but I would like to show you how to do it from the DC UI, right? Because doing anything from the GUI is pretty simple, but from the DC GUI it's going to be interesting. So I'll show you that. So basically go back to the DC GUI. This yellow screen is literally your DC GUI, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit F2, put in the password again. There you go. And once I have the password, let's scroll down to the, let's go to the troubleshooting options. And here you can see on the right hand side it says ESXi shell is disabled. So I'm going to hit the enter, and you can see it will immediately switch to enabled. Cool. Let's scroll to the next thing, which is the SSH. Here also it says SSH is disabled. So I'm going to, toggle it, and SSH is enabled now, right? So that's it. I mean, that's pretty simple to enable, right? So let's go now, escape out of this, probably escape out, maybe it will, yeah, that's it. So let's now probably go to my terminal and try to SSH into this guy, right? So let me just clear the screen a bit. Remember, I'm doing port forwarding, so I can connect to this using, first let's see if we can ping. Yeah, I can ping. So I'm going to do SSH root at, and I'm going to use this IP address because of port forwarding. In your case, if you're doing it directly from the AD, you can use the 192.168 subnet, right, which we are using for that. So there you go. It is allowing me. Let's put in the password. There you go, guys. So I'm inside the ESXi now. So this is really useful whenever you have to do some debugging on your ESXi and so on. All right. So that's mainly for this video. Apart from that, we'll come back to the next video, and probably we'll talk about how to install the next appliance, which is that, let's go back. So Google Chrome, right? The next important appliance is the vCenter, which we'll have to install, right? So let's come back to the video and let's do that. Thanks for watching, guys.